The chairman of the MILF Central Committee, Al-Haj Murad Ibrahim himself, made a policy statement some time ago that the MILF will not accept any watered-down version of the BBL, and that the government should comply with all the signed agreements, meaning government should comply with the framework agreement on the Bangsamoro and the comprehensive agreement on the Bangsamoro, from where the BBL comes from. Well, if in the event that Congress passes a watered-down version of the BBL, which has veered away from or has departed radically from the comprehensive agreement on the Bangsamoro, which was signed by both the MILF and the GPH, the MILF will not accept it. If we go back and look at the statement of the chairman of the MILF Central Committee, Al-Haj Murad Ibrahim, he said that if the BBL will not be passed under the administration of President Aquino, then we can wait until the next administration comes to implement what has been signed between the MILF and the government of the Philippines. Well, from all indications, the picture really looks very gloomy, because after the Mamasapano Incident in January 25, black propaganda was launched against the MILF, and the BBL was affected, has been affected by this incident in Mamasapano, and this incident has become an excuse for the spoilers, those who are against the Bangsamoro, to derail not only the peace process but the passage of the BBL in Congress. So we are not really very optimistic, to be frank about it, as to whether the BBL will be passed under this administration. And if there will be a BBL that will be passed, it will not be the kind of BBL that is compliant with the comprehensive agreement on the Bangsamoro. Well, you can say that it is really a betrayal of the spirit and letter of the negotiations, because yes, it's true. When the negotiations between the MILF and the Philippine government started, the compromise was the Philippine government would not insist on the Constitution as the framework for the negotiations. On the other hand, the MILF also agreed that it would set aside its original goal of political independence. So in other words, this was the compromise. This was the biggest compromise in the negotiations. Now that we have reached this stage wherein the BBL has been drafted, the Philippine government now insists, or rather Congress insists, that it has to comply with the Constitution, which is a departure from that compromise that we made in 1997 when the negotiations started between the MILF and the GPH. To us, this is actually reneging on or backtracking from what had been agreed on at the very start of the negotiations. The chairman of the MILF, Al-Haj Murad, himself said that whatever happens, the MILF will not leave, will not abandon the peace process. But then again, that does not preclude the fact that if aggression occurs, the MILF has the right to defend itself. It has the right to defend itself, and it has the right to defend the Bangsamoro people, which it will do in the event that aggression is launched against the MILF and the Bangsamoro people. Well, okay, this is with reference to the BBL. No? Okay, if the BBL becomes hopeless and it will not be passed, then we have to look for other options by which we can advance the cause of our people for the right to self-determination. So we're studying now other options, legal options, peaceful options that would allow us to move forward and really exercise our right to self-determination. But that does not necessarily mean that it's going to be war. War is the last option, meaning if we are aggressed upon, then we have no option but to fight. But insofar as the grant of internal right to self-determination is concerned, if it becomes well-nigh impossible for us to exercise internal right of self-determination within the larger framework of the Philippine state, then we have other options. We can think of other options that would allow us to exercise even external right of self-determination outside of the Philippine state framework. That is possible. That is possible if all options, all legal remedies have been exhausted, through which we can exercise internal right to self-determination. If that's the only option, then by all means, we have to go and adopt that option. Political independence. Well, to be frank about it, there is no guarantee. We can just hope that the next administration, in the event that the BBL will not be passed under this present administration, there is no guarantee really that the next administration would implement what had been agreed on under this present administration, nor there is no guarantee that it would pass the BBL without departing from the signed agreements between the MILF and the government of the Philippines. There is no guarantee. But we are still hopeful that the next administration would be able to realize that the only solution to the Bangsamoro question, to address the Bangsamoro question peacefully and justly, is for the BBL based on the CAB, based on the comprehensive agreement of the Bangsamoro, to be passed, so that a meaningful self-rule would be given to the Bangsamoro people, and then by then, and because of that, we can end the violence in this part of Mindanao. No, we are negotiating with the government of the Philippines, and the President represents the government of the Philippines. When we started negotiations with the government, it was with government. Although at the front line was the office of the President himself, because he's the head of state and the head of government. So when we negotiated with government, it was negotiating with government as a whole. See, the office of the President President Aquino himself. So that was what we had in mind. When we negotiated with the Philippine government through the office of the President, through the President, then we were negotiating with the Philippine government as a whole. Well, we just hope and pray that these politicians who are vehemently opposing the passage of the Bangsamoro Basic Law, or who want to mangle the Bangsamoro Basic Law, would come to their senses. If they are really serious, to end this conflict in the Bangsamoro, then they should pass the BBL based on the CAB. They should honor the agreement that was signed between the MILF and the GPH. So that's all we ask for them to honor the signed agreements by passing the BBL that is based on the comprehensive agreement on the Bangsamoro. Yes, we believe that all these reports pointing at the MILF as the culprit in the Mamasapano are all false, because they serve the agenda of the politicians who are looking forward to the elections in 2016. They are catering actually not to justice, but to the voters the electorate in the Philippines. The Mamasapano, the MILF has no fault in that, because if you look at the Mamasapano incident seriously, it was a violation. It was a violation of the agreement. It was a violation of the ceasefire agreement. There was no coordination. There was no prior information as the agreement calls for between the forces of government and the MILF. There are protocols which had been violated, which were ignored by by the government forces who operated in Mamasapano. So, if you look at the whole picture, the one who violated the agreement, the one who violated the ceasefire agreement, for that matter, is government by launching this Operation Exodus in Mamasapano. In fact, they did not even coordinate the government forces, the government itself, the various security forces under government or in government did not coordinate among themselves. So now they're having a problem within them. So we do not see this as something that the MLF should be faulted with. Well, they are calling now for, you see, emotions ran high right after Mamasapano, and they only see one side of the situation. They only see what happened to the so-called fallen 44, the SAF commandos. But they do not see that in the incident, the Bangsamoro also suffered casualties. The MLF suffered casualties. See, and now they're calling this a massacre, which is not a massacre. Now, again, they're using the term murder, which is not, because that was a legitimate encounter between the MILF and government forces, the SAF in particular. The MILF was defending its community from an assault or from an attack made by the SAF commandos who did not coordinate, who did not pass through the established protocols of the peace process as agreed upon in the signed agreements. So it is not the fault of the MILF. The MILF would not be faulted for what happened in Mamasapano. If they want justice, if they're calling for justice for the fallen 44, how about justice for the MILF who died in Mamasapano, the civilians who died in Mamasapano, who were killed, who were murdered actually by the SAF commandos, because these are innocent civilians. These were innocent civilians. How about the Bangsamoro who were killed, the Bangsamoros who were killed in the past, the massacres that happened in the 70s up to the present? If they want to call for justice, then they might as well include the Bangsamoros who were killed in this war in Mindanao. Yes. Well, yes, of course there is an injustice. They have always been unjust with us. The government, the Philippine state, has not treated the Bangsamoro on the basis of justice. So that's why what we're calling for is that we demand for peace, but peace based on justice. Because unless we can have justice, we cannot have peace. It is important that first, the government should treat us justly, because that is the only way by which we can really establish an enduring peace, a lasting peace. And the best way to do that is to rectify the wrongs of the past, the injustices that had been committed on us, that had been heaped on us since the time we were incorporated without the plebiscitary consent of our forefathers into this Philippine Republic. That is why what we were saying in the negotiations is that the negotiations, the peace negotiations between us and the Philippine government should address the root cause of the Bangsamoro question. And the root cause of the Bangsamoro question is the injustice that had been heaped on us since the time that we were arbitrarily incorporated into the Philippine Republic, first in 1935 and then in 1946. This is what we are trying to address. Well, it is expected that in the absence of justice, there can never be peace. And if there is no peace, then you can expect war to break out anytime. conflict will always be there. Conflict will always be there. And that's why we are pushing and demanding that the BBL should be passed in Congress. The Bangsamoro government will subsequently be established. A Bangsamoro government which the people, the Bangsamoro, will feel as their own government. It is not an alien government, but the government of the Bangsamoro, so that we can have lasting peace based on justice.